and Opus 5 dropped less than an hour ago. You already know that. What you actually want to know is whether it can write. So I gave it a grimdark fantasy chapter, and in one pass it gave me this. The rain had been falling on Thrushmere for 9 days, and the road had given up being a road sometime around the 4th. And then this. Some habits are prayers with words filed off. That is good. Annoyingly good. But then I kept reading, and Opus 5 started leaving fingerprints. What this test actually is. Quick disclosure before I pretend this is laboratory science. This was generated inside an established fiction writing environment. The response says it followed standing rules against M-dashes, colon-heavy prose, obvious negative definition sentences, and first-stop metaphors. So this is not a clean, zero-shot comparison against Opus 4.8. It is more useful than that for working writers. This is Opus 5, operating inside a real creative workflow, with basic constraints already in place. The full controlled comparison comes next. Today, we are asking one question. How good is the raw material? Why Opus 5 did extremely well. First, it built a complete moral machine instead of merely describing a gloomy village. Emeric Vale is a royal reckoner sent to collect a debt from people who cannot pay it. The debt becomes 8 human bodies for the mines. Then he discovers the real accounting only demands 6. The number becomes the chapters played. The world building arrives through procedure, arithmetic, and consequence. We learn what the government is, what the mines are, and what Emeric has become without stopping for a lore lecture. The dialogue is also controlled. When a father accidentally reveals that his daughter turns 12 next month, Emeric tells him, "Then your girl is 11 today, and 11 is not on the schedule. I would advise you to keep your mouth shut about the month." That line does 3 jobs. It explains the rule, reveals that Emeric has a conscience, and makes the father's gratitude feel worse than his anger. The chapter also sustains its motifs. The ledger stays dry while the village drowns. Emeric's hands stay steady while everything inside him has gone hollow. The words procedure, 6, and 8 keep returning with greater weight. That is not random pretty prose stapled onto a plot. Opus 5 understands the architecture of the chapter. Fingerprint 1. Every paragraph wants to be quoted. The first fingerprint is that Opus 5 is almost too consistently impressive. Listen to how many lines arrive already dressed for social media. Some habits are prayer with the words filed off. 5 is a number you can't stand up under. 6 years had taught him the geography of this conversation, the way a bad mew teaches you weather. He stood there, 15 years old, with his whole life folded up small enough to fit in his fist. 6, 6, 6, patient as stone in a boot. Any one of these could be excellent. When the authorial hand begins to feel less like a person noticing something, and more like a machine continuously auditioning for quotation graphic. The prose is not bad. The calibration is too uniformly polished. Fingerprint 2. It shows, and then explains what it showed. Opus 5 also retains Claude's habit of landing an image and then explaining the emotional meaning after the reader already understood it. Here's the original. Somewhere in the second row, a woman made a sound like she'd been struck in the stomach, and then swallowed it hard, because she decided in that instant that she wasn't going to give him satisfaction, and that decision cost her more than the sound would have. The physical action already works. The rest interprets her private decision for us and then tells us what the decision cost. I would test the leaner version. Somewhere in the second row, a woman made a sound like she'd been struck in the stomach. She swallowed it hard. Emeric wrote 3 words in the margin. Present, compliant, assembled. Now the reader performs the final piece of the emotional work. That does not automatically make my version better. It shows the editorial decision Opus 5 still requires. Do we want the model's interpretation, or do we want to trust the image? Fingerprint 3. Remove one habit and another takes its place. The model obeyed the standing guardrails that there are no M-dashes in the chapter and largely avoids the classic not X but Y construction. But Slop does not disappear merely because we ban its favorite punctuation. It migrates. Across this chapter, because appears 23 times. Variations of the way appears 7 times. The prose repeatedly uses long chains joined by and, followed by a final clause that explains what the chain means. That is the larger slop lesson. A van word list can remove visible symptoms. It cannot create judgment. If you forbid a model's favorite structure without checking what it replaces it with, you've not developed the voice, you've moved the pattern. The ending is the strongest evidence that Opus 5 can sustain more of the surface style. Emmerich leaves after taking 8 people, knowing the legal vet should have only taken 6. Chapter ends. They went out the way they'd come. The road took them back an inch at a time. Behind them, Trustmere stood in the water with 2 fewer graves in its future than it would have ever known about. That is thematically complete. It closes the rain, the road, and the arithmetic, and Emmerich's compromised mercy in one image. I would scrutinize the sentence because it's conspicuously polished. I would not automatically cut it. Scrubbing AI prose does not mean vandalizing every good line until nobody suspects the machine. It means deciding which lines belong to this story, and which lines merely know how to sound as if they do. Final verdict. My first impression is that Opus 5 produces excellent raw fiction. It holds a long scene together, it understands moral pressure, it controls dialogue, motif, and escalation. Most importantly, it gives us material worth editing instead of asking the editor to invent the entire chapter afterward. But it is still recognizably Claude. It over-explains after strong images. It makes too many paragraphs quotable, and when you block one familiar pattern, another syntactic rhythm expands to occupy the space. That is not condemnation. It is the reason the human editorial system still matters. Next, we will run Opus 5 and Opus 4.8 through the same clean assignment, blind the samples, and see whether this is a genuine model improvement or simply a stronger performance under existing guardrails. Would you publish this chapter, close the raw, or cut the explanatory lines and trust the reader? Let us know in the comments. This is Shane Mercer, SoundCube.